Thank you for everybody attending tonight. Bernie is obviously one of the best ambassadors of a brand, especially when it comes to Heaven Hill, that it currently exists. He's not only an ambassador, he's also a musical talent, which hopefully we'll get some of that later. But other than that, I'm going to pass it off to Ariana, and we'll get started.
Hi guys, my name is Ariana. For those of you who don't know me, I am the state manager for Heaven Hill Brands here in Ohio. Thank you all for joining us. And Bernie's going to lead us through this tasting. He is our global brand ambassador, and we also like to call him the king of bottled and bond whiskeys. So I'm going to let him take it away. We're going to taste some bottled and bond whiskeys tonight. Bernie, we are ready to start whenever you are.
Awesome. Well, thanks everybody. Thanks Ariana. Thanks everybody. Troy. I'm Bernie Lubbers. I'm the global brand ambassador for Heaven Hill Distillery. I cover the whiskeys, and I'm based here in Louisville, Kentucky, my hometown. I was born and raised here. I've been in the business since 2005, so it's been quite a ride since 2005. When I started back then, I was at Jim Beam. There was 10 distilleries in Kentucky owned by 7 different companies, and today there's over 70 distilleries in Kentucky, and there's 2,300 craft distillers that did not exist back then. So it's been an amazing growth for the whole industry, and it's been awesome. I go around the country and been to Europe a few times, and so it's really fun to see not just a national but an international interest in American whiskeys and bourbon, and especially Heaven Hills. We promote all whiskeys, all bourbons, all distilleries. It's just it's the rising tide raises all ships. You can't be Napa Valley with only one winery, and you can't be the Bourbon Trail with only 1 or 2 distilleries. So it is awesome to be in an industry that is competitive but also friendly. So the 3 whiskeys we're going to be tasting tonight are one of my favorite tastings. Not only is it bottle and bond, which I love talking about bottle and bonds, and feel quite a responsibility for bottle and bonds. Fred Minnick has said that it's the reason that bottle and bonds is back is because of me. I appreciate that, and I know it takes a whole village to bring something back like that. But I like to think of myself as the Johnny Appleseed of bottle and bonds. It was something that struck me years ago when I was traveling around and looking for the bottle here. I know I've got it behind me somewhere. But it was an old granddad bottle and bond that first got me on the bottle and bond trail back in the 80s. And I was up in Parma, Ohio, so outside of Cleveland, as you all know, being up there. And I saw this orange label back behind the bar, and those big words "bonded" across the top. And we didn't have that brand much in the late 80s, early 90s in Kentucky. That was kind of in control states mostly. And it was a brand that under Jim Beam that they didn't. I mean, they were concentrating on Jim Beam, right, and all that stuff. But I just love that label, and knew that label from growing up and seeing different advertisements and things along the way. But you really didn't find the whiskey that often, and I was just drawn to it. And when I came home, I told my dad, I said, "Hey, Dad, I found a great bourbon." Because my dad was a big bourbon drinker, my mom was a bourbon drinker, and it's kind of fun to find your own bourbon. It's not your mom's or not your dad's; it's yours, right? That you found. And I said, he goes, "Which one is it?" And I said, "Well, old granddad bottle and bond." He goes, "Oh, bottle and bond, that's the good stuff." And I went, "Ooh, that stuck in my head." So even way before I was in the industry, my dad, who was a bourbon drinker, said, "That's the good stuff." So that sticks in your head. Then after I got in the business and I worked at a company that had old granddad in their portfolio, I was like, "Oh, good, I get to talk about this." And like, well, it's not the way this really works. You got to talk about where the money comes from. That's the brands you're going to talk about, and blah, blah, blah. And it was fine. But I was just fascinated by bottle and bond, and then learned how much restrictions were on bottle and bond. All my dad really knew was it's 100 proof and under the supervision of the United States government. That was about it. So but him saying that's the good stuff really stuck with me. And then I started studying the standards of identity and reading how each word on a label means something by law. Kentucky Straight Bourbon Whiskey. Then on top of it, Bottle and Bond. How special Bottle and Bond is. That's when I really fell in love with it. And then when I came over to Heaven Hill in 2012, and we had all these great Bottle and Bonds, over 10 Bottle and Bonds at the time. There was probably only 20 Bottle and Bonds available. Now there's probably 40 to 50, so not a whole lot more. When you think that there's 2,300 craft distillers, 10 legacy distillers, all making dozens of labels, and the craft distillers making one or two, that means there might be between 3,000 to 4,000 labels of American whiskey, and there's still only less than 50. That's a very unique slice of the whiskey world, of the American whiskey world. So that's what I love so much about Bottle and Bonds. Plus, it brings alive just what happens inside of a barrel when we're doing this tasting of 3 whiskeys tonight. Mellow Corn, Evan Williams Bottle and Bond, and Henry McKenna. There's a lot going on in this taste. And so when we taste, so just before we get into it, I want to go over these words. So words on labels mean something. By law, we are regulated by the United States government, and the Tax and Trade Bureau, the TTB. Probably seen some of the labels that are approved in that, and some of y'all might troll that page and see what's coming up through the world and all that kind of good stuff. But these words all mean something, individually and then together. So that we take them backwards. So the word whiskey, the definition of whiskey is a fermented mash of grain distilled up to 190 proof, which right there sounds like vodka. I just described vodka. Most vodka is made from wheat or other grains and distilled to 190 proof. But the difference between vodka and whiskey on the further definition is whiskey is stored in oak. So right there, it has to touch oak, except for corn whiskey, which does not have to touch any oak. So there's an exception for corn whiskey. Then you have, has to be in the bottle, 80 proof or higher. Then it has to have the characteristics generally attributed to whiskey, which means it must look, smell, and taste like whiskey. If you follow all those laws, you can put the whiskey medal on your chest, just like a military man or woman. But if you're a sharpshooter and you're a very good aim, you win that medal and you wear it on your chest with pride. So we wear the whiskey medal with pride on our chest. Then we have the word bourbon. Or here, you have the word corn. With Rittenhouse rye, it would say rye. Those are all metals too. So the corn metal states that it's just not grain. It has to be at least 80% corn to be a corn whiskey. So whiskey says fermented mash of grain. This is a fermented mash of at least 80% corn. And then it must be aged not just in oak, but brand new uncharred or used barrels. You have a choice. Corn whiskey also does not have to be aged, as in the first definition says, except for corn whiskey, which does not have to be aged. So we have Georgia Moon, which is unaged corn whiskey. Distilled no more than 160 proof, so not 190 like whiskey, much lower. The lower you distill something, more flavor from the materials that you're using stays in that. Aged in the appropriate types of containers, used or brand new uncharred. And then no other additives can be added to it other than to be called corn whiskey. So we follow those laws, we earn the corn medal. Then there's the bourbon metal. That's at least 51% corn. So a lower percentage of corn, although most corn bourbon whiskeys are up in the high 70%. Okay? But minimum 51% corn. Okay? And then brand new charred oak containers. So you don't get a choice. It has to be brand new and charred every single time. That distilled below 160 proof, barreled at no more than 125, which is also the law for corn whiskey too. So very, very little definition changes other than the 80% of the type of oak of corn whiskey to bourbon whiskey. Follow those laws, you get to be bourbon whiskey. Rye whiskey, same thing, 51% rye, below 160, brand new charred oak container. Now the word straight. Straight is an age statement. Straight means that it is aged in the appropriate types of barrels, either used or brand new uncharred, or brand new charred for a minimum of 2 years. You can call it straight. Then the word Kentucky. That's also a middle, because right now there are distilleries in just about every state in the United States. Yes, I'm sure you can, if it's part of the United States, you can, so Puerto Rico probably qualifies, right? It's part of the United States. But Kentucky means something because we have the limestone filtered water. Let's be honest, it's 2022. We can filter water, we can have good water. So no matter where you are in the world, you can have good water. So why is that so important to be in Kentucky then? Well, would you rather have Florida straight bourbon whiskey or North Dakota straight bourbon whiskey or Kentucky straight bourbon whiskey? They all make great whiskey, but they're going to taste a little different because Florida, you get mostly hot, no below zero or cold. North Dakota, total opposite. Cold, not a lot of hot. Okay? So it's going to make different whiskey as it sits in those barrels and the types of warehouses that they are. We have 4 distinct seasons here. You get extreme cold in the wintertime, extreme hot, and it's 90 degrees today, week after Derby. It's going to get 100 degrees in July and August, and it'll get below zero in January, February. This is the way it works here. It's awesome for making whiskey. So Kentucky means something. Kentucky, we also have the expertise of making bourbon and whiskey. So if you've been in a state that doesn't have a lot of history and a lot of distillers, you got to kind of start from scratch. But we have 87 years in our company and 100, 150, 200 years in other companies. We have a legacy of people who know how to make whiskey in this area. Those other areas are going to make great whiskey. It's going to take them a while to learn. Just like I wrote my dad's recipe down for making chili. First time I ever made chili in my apartment after I got out of college. Do you think that my chili, that handwritten recipe that my dad put down, tasted anything like my dad's chili? Hell no, right? Because he didn't tell me when he put the spices on while he was cooking the burger or the meats. He didn't tell me when he put in the cumin and the cayenne pepper and the chili. He just said, this is what you put in, kind of, but whatever. I had a different stove than my dad. I had a different pot than my dad. Things tasted different. Takes a while. Now I think I make damn good chili, better than my dad's. But it's different than my dad's. And that's what's really probably going to happen in the craft world, right? They're going to learn on their own. They're going to make great whiskey. It's going to take a few years. When you find one, you know, you want to support it. You want to buy their whiskeys knowing it's going to get better every time. So that's those 4 words, Kentucky straight bourbon whiskey. Then on top of it, if it has the words bottled and bond on it, that's a whole nother deal. There's a whole other page of standards of identity if you're going to call a spirit bottled and bond. So I told you the laws that have those medals, Kentucky straight bourbon whiskey on your chest. Now, bottle and bond means you must be distilled in the same distillery, in the same spirits and same class of materials. So you can't mix spirits together. I can't make a neutral spirit and then a whiskey and a let's say a rum and mingle them together. That's a different class of materials, class of spirits. From the same distilling season, and there's 2 distilling seasons, There's spring, the barrels you fill from January through June, and barrels you fill from July through December. So a finite number of barrels you can make in a 6-month period. Stored for a minimum of 4 years. So remember, straight was 2. Bottle and bond is a minimum of 4. It can be over 4, as this is, and bottle and bond, but you can't be under 4. Okay? Then nothing but pure water can be added to get it down to the 100 proof, 50 degrees of ABV. 100 proof. That's a proof gallon. That's what we get charged taxes on. So that's important to the government. That's why they defined it that way. But 100 degrees of proof and pure water. So think about it. This act was passed in 1897. Right now, I know exactly who made it, or it comes from one distillery. I'm guaranteed a good age, a minimum of 4 years. I'm guaranteed a good strength, minimum exactly 100 proof, and I'm guaranteed a purity of pure water only. Now, on top of that, I got to put the real name of the distillery and the distinct distilled spirits plant number, or DSP. I got to put that on the label. Doesn't have to be the front or the back. It can be either one, but we display this on the front to show those laws. So it's distilled spirits plant, DSP, KY, because we're in Kentucky, and 1, because we're the best. It's a little joke, but happens to be our number, which is a pretty cool number. But you put your DSP. So now I know exactly who made it. I know the purity. I'm guaranteed a good age, guaranteed a good strength. That's important. It was important in 1897, and it's important now. So that's one reason why I like Bottle and Bond. It's got all the medals. It's the Green Beret or Navy SEAL of spirits. It has all the medals. Why wouldn't you want every single one? Doesn't matter if it costs $15 a bottle. Doesn't matter if it's whiskey of the world. They're all Green Berets. Why wouldn't you want every single one? So before I go on and we start tasting, are there any questions? I haven't went over a lot of material in a short period of time, but is there any questions anybody has before we get on to the tasting here? And I can't see the chat, so Troy, you want to see? I can pull the chat up. I got the chat up now. So. Any questions, anybody? If not, we'll go on to the taste. All right. So we've got Mellow Corn, Evan Williams, Bottle and Bond, and Henry McKenna. This is an awesome flight you can do with your friends at any time that you have Henry McKenna. Okay? If you don't have Henry McKenna, throw in a Rittenhouse rye, and it's a great tasting as well. But the first two, Mellow Corn and Evan Williams, Bottle and Bond. So one's a corn whiskey, one's a bourbon whiskey. They're both from around the same recipe. Our recipe for Evan Williams is 78% corn. The recipe for Mellow Corn's 80. Remember, it has to be a minimum of 80, and it is 80. We want to have malted barley, at least 12% for the enzymes and the conversion. So we're always going to have a minimum of 12% in any of our distillates. That leaves 8% for rye here. We have 78% corn, 10% rye, so 2% more rye on the bourbon, and 2% less corn on the bourbon, and then both 12% malted barley. So around the same recipe, yet Mellow Corn, and they're both 4 years old, they're both 100 proof. Mellow Corn's a light straw color, and look how deep that color is on Evan Williams. This is in a used charred barrel. This is in a brand new charred barrel. So to the same recipe, tasting these two together will bring to life what a used barrel does versus a brand new charred barrel. Most whiskeys of the world, single malts, Scotch, blended Scotches, Irish whiskey, Canadian whiskey, Japanese whiskey, all aged in a used charred barrel. Bourbon, rye, wheat whiskeys, all in a brand new charred barrel. Brings that to life. So we want to put the Evan Williams, the mellow corn. I'm going to put that in my left hand. Right? See how much lighter that light straw color is. And I'm going to put Evan Williams in my right hand. We already can see the color difference. Let's smell the differences. And when I put my nose in the glass, I'm opening my mouth. And that way I don't overload my nose. It's 100 proof, so I don't overload it. And also can almost taste it a little bit. It's a good way to do any high proof spirit. Now let's smell and see what aromas we get out of the Evan Williams. Now let's taste the mellow corn, and I put enough in my mouth to give it a little chew. That distributed through my mouth without swishing it. Don't want to overload I don't want to blow my head off. It is 100 proof. Feel where it's hitting on your palate. It's 92% sweet, 8% spice with that rye, but because it's in a used barrel, those flavors aren't being magnified. So those spice notes aren't really coming out. The sweetness from the barley and the corn are really, that's forward. That's palate forward. And it's in the front of my tongue. It's in the front of my palate, just like a wheated bourbon would be. All in the front of my palate. With a wheated bourbon, there's no rye. So you don't get that back of the tongue spice. But with the mellow corn, because it's in a used barrel, I'm only getting a little bit of that whisper of spice in the finish. That's me personally. You might be picking up more. It's all personal when it comes to tasting and what you're smelling and tasting. A lot of corn. The science that happens inside the barrel when you age a corn distillate in a used charred barrel versus a brand new charred barrel. The science that happens is if I age it in a brand new charred oak container, over the first year or two, the corn flavor becomes neutral. And then the barrel notes start taking over. The vanilla, honey, and caramel start coming out. More prevalent. Takes about 4, 5, 6 good years to get those vanilla, honey, and caramels. Okay? In a used charred barrel, the corn flavor will always remain. And of course, we want this to be different than bourbon. We already have bourbon. We want corn whiskey, and that's what makes it different. So that pleasant, very sweet, very front of the palate corn whiskey. Now let's taste the Evan Williams bottle and bond.
Bernie, really quickly, we have a question. What kind of used barrels do you use?
I see it there. I see that. I was just going to go through this to illustrate the difference real quick, and I'll get to that right after this. And then you get that pop of spice in the back of your palate immediately. At the same time, you get that vanilla, honey, and caramel in the front of your palate, and that sweetness, and then those whatever barrel notes you taste. And that's the difference between a brand new barrel, a brand new charred oak barrel in bourbon, and a used barrel. So the types of used barrels that we use is a once used Evan Williams barrel. Got my bottle of Black Label up here, but Evan Williams, #2 selling bourbon in the world. We got a lot of those barrels. So we take a once used Evan Williams barrel, and then we use it once again for a mellow corn. And then we age that for 4 years, and then we sell that barrel. We don't keep using the mellow corn barrels after because we got more of them coming down the line, right? We don't have to worry about getting used charred barrels. We've got 1,500 of them every day. Okay? So that's another good thing about it is we make money using the barrel one more time. But we're not doing it to save money. We're doing it because that's the standard of identity for it. And because we only sell 6,000-7,000 cases of mellow corn a year, it takes up room in the rick house. No other distillery other than Balcones and a couple others make an aged corn whiskey. So it all kind of balances out because 66 hands have to put every barrel in the rick house. 66 hands have to take them out. It's very labor intensive. But our commitment for our distillery, because we're family owned, and the directive from the family, this Max Shapira and his family that own the company, is we must strive to make every recipe of American whiskey. We don't use rye barrels for mellow corn that I know of. There might be a few that, there's human error or things like that, but we got 90% of what we make is our traditional bourbon recipe for Evan Williams. So we make 1,500 barrels a day. So mellow corn is basically in a once used Evan Williams barrel. It would be interesting to do an experiment using corn whiskey with Rittenhouse rye or Pikesville rye barrels. That would be a fun experiment to do one day. But we could have them in there. I don't know. I'll bring that up at the next innovation meeting, which is next week. So why does a brand new barrel create such a different flavor than the used barrel? It's like using a tea bag the first time or the second time. So, every time you use that tea bag, you're going to get a little less flavor out of it every single time. And because we're aging these for years, we're not just putting it in for a couple minutes. A lot of the chemistry that happens inside of a barrel, and we're just discovering some of this chemistry and science that happens inside of a barrel in the last year or two. Independent Stave Company out of Lebanon, Missouri, and of course they have a couple cooperages here in Kentucky, but their main operation is down in Missouri. They've been leading the way for the science and the what happens inside the barrel. It has to do with a lot of tannins and things that are happening there that's way above my pay grade, but it's coming down to being simplicity. It's like using a tea bag over and over and over. You'll get less and less and less out of it than you do when it's brand new, because you can refire the barrel sometimes. We don't do that. They do that over in Scotland sometimes. But that brings those sugars to life again in those barrels. We sell our barrels to anyone who will want to buy them. We're a very large distillery, so our customers buy. We don't just sell one barrel at a time, 10 barrels at a time, 50 barrels at a time. We're going to sell 10,000 to 100,000 barrels at a time to other distilleries who make whiskeys, tequilas, rums. Anybody that ages any spirits, we're going to sell to, and especially those who we have long relationships with. If you machine turn out the used barrel past charred to virgin oak, at that point would technically be a new barrel. I don't think so. That's still that once that barrel has had whiskey in it and has been used, because whiskey can penetrate even further down than the char line. So my answer would be no. That would not be a new barrel, even if you chart it. And these are all experiments they're being done by Independent Stave, and they have once every 2-3 years they have a barrel symposium that's held by the industry, so the industry can share best practices. All distilleries come together. Of course, so the larger distilleries and craft distillers come together to the symposium, and they learn about science that they've learned. They also take data. Independent Stave will also pay for barrels, so they give us X amount of barrels each year to experiment with. And sometimes they ask us to fill it with certain distillates and then put different measuring devices on it. And sometimes we will ask them if they want to participate in an innovation or a study. It's truly fascinating. And a lot of this stuff we're learning, as I said, the last year or two. So you do taste a big difference in the mellow corn whiskey and Evan Williams bourbon. So just imagine you're sitting at your house or at a bar with your friends. Now you can put down into words and describe the differences between corn whiskey and bourbon whiskey, where just a few minutes ago you might not be able to. That's why I love this tasting. This is brought to life. That now there's Balcones in Texas that's only been aged for about 6 months in a used barrel, and it's much deeper in color. If you notice that true blue that they make, well, again, they're in Texas. It's a lot hotter down there, and they're also using smaller barrels. And they're using different type of used barrels. So they're getting what I would call Texas corn whiskey, even though it's not in a brand new char barrel. That's not why it's darker. It's just darker because it's hotter, smaller barrel, a couple other things. And I think that's what's so cool about having the different state designations on too, because there will be some terroir, if you will, when it comes to your whiskeys and what you find you like and don't like. Right? Yeah, that's that soak line. Booker Noll called that soakage. I don't know if that's a true word, but he called it soakage, or it's soaked into the wood. And there's a couple thoughts there. That could be where it's soaking into the wood or soaking between the wood too. There's also some of that going on. There's those seams, there's no glue. It's all pressure. And some of that liquid will get soaked up through that kind of seam there too. We really don't know which is which in that red line. The red line is the sugar line that goes through, that is burnt, and all of that sugar. I mean, those sugars from the wood gets up to the edge, and then past that, that's what Booker called soakage. And the that soak line, and then, or is it through the seam? If you machined it down, you would lose a lot of flavor. I would think that too. I mean, but it also would make a unique whiskey if you machined it down. That would be a cool experiment. I wonder if that's being done. Yeah, the types of corn that we use is the same for all of our distillates, and that's number 2 field corn. That's what you see driving down I-71, I-75, I-64, I-65 in Ohio, Kentucky, Indiana. All that's what that is, number 2 field corn. If you're a smaller distillery, I know at Jeff the Creed, they're using a heirloom red strain of corn. I know there's some people are using blue corn, things like that. As a large distillery, we can't do that. We mill over 1 million pounds of grain a day. There's not enough heirloom grains in the world to supply what we need. So that's where the craft distillers can come in and crease that seam of what they can do that's different than us, because we make some pretty damn good whiskey. It's not like, hey, I'm going to put, I'm a small craft distiller. I'm going to turn my still on, and in 20 years, my hope is to make better whiskey than Heaven Hill or Jim Beam. Well, that's hard to do. We've been doing this a long time. But you can find out what we can't do by the size of what we're doing or our needs. And I find those to be the more successful craft distillers. And the white oak supply. Yeah, there's more white oak now than there was 100 years ago. But there's also we just had 20. So this morning we had one of our suppliers. We have 2 major suppliers, McGinnis out of Cuba, Missouri, and Independent Stave, say that their barrels are going to go 25% on top of now. A year ago, barrels were $170. They're now $204. So think about that. We fill 400,000 a year. 400,000 times $34 a piece is a lot to go up like that. We spend $120,000 a day in corn. I'll say that again. We spend $120,000 a day in corn. And 6 months ago, we were spending $50,000 a day in corn. So you haven't seen the prices change too much yet because it hasn't hit that whiskey yet. But that's an expense we all have to absorb for a while. And hopefully, those are market prices. So hopefully those all come back down a little bit so that we don't have to raise the price. And that's where it kind of helps having Evan Williams being a 2-3 million case brand. And then because the craft distiller is paying way over $300 per barrel. Because we buy 400,000 of them, we get them at $204 a piece. But the white oak supply of trees is good, but it still has to be managed correctly. And that's where our cooperages and we get involved with the local, the folks that do the harvesting of the trees. And so we're also trying to work with the farmers who own the land that those harvesters work at, the lumberjacks all on the work at. And it still has to be talked and be top of mind. And what they do is they do a 60-year cut, 60, 70-year cut. A tree's 80 to 85 years old when you cut it down. So don't cut every tree down, make it a moonscape, if you will, and leave trees. You can do a 60 to 70-year cut so you don't come back to the same area for 60 years, 70 years. So how long has mellow corn been around? That says copyright 1945 at the very bottom there. Right.
Is it still in the same form that it was back then?
Yeah, we've never changed the label. This is not a retro label. The formula, I don't know. That was from the Medley Distillery. That's why their crest is on there. Mm-hmm. We bought that brand when that distillery went out of business. And I don't know if it's the same formula. It has to be close because it has to be a minimum of 80% corn. I've asked Jeb Medley that. He doesn't know. He wasn't at the distillery, but I'll do some noodling around, but it's got to be fairly close. Certainly when we got it, our yeast strain's different. So that's going to be a 10% difference in flavor profile right there. That's another fascinating thing is what I call what's been described to me as the distiller's rule of thumb. So a way a distiller looks at something before they make a distillate, when they want to see what flavor, what different components lead to the final flavor, 10% is yeast. So if I have three different whiskeys that I have, and I put a different yeast strain in 3 different whiskeys, made the same way off the same still, put in the same charred barrel in the same area of the same rick house, those 3 whiskeys will taste 10% different. Does that make sense? If I change the still from a pot still to a column still, or a 3-chambered still, instead of the other 2, then that will taste 15% different. If I change the recipe, the small grains, the fermentation, so Rittenhouse rye is made very same way as Evan Williams bourbon, but the recipe is different. It's 4 years, 100 proof, same charred barrel, same yeast. I think everything's the same. They should taste 25% different. And then aging accounts for at least 50%. And it's a sliding scale. So if I age something for 18 years, like Elijah Craig, that aging might account for 60%. So that's a cool way to look at things at on another level. Okay, it just helps put the pieces of the puzzle together.
So
yeah.
I have one question.
Sure.
And I do know the answer, but maybe some people here that don't. Why was the decision made to have bonded products when it comes to whiskey?
Oh, well, that was in the late 1800s, and you had a lot of rectified whiskey and whiskey that had a lot of additives to it that were safe and unsafe. And then also, so it was a way to put a standard on it. So people say we have a purity law. This was 9 years before the Pure Food and Drug Act of 1906, which had you list the ingredients. Also, let's not forget that a lot of at the time, doctors were prescribing whiskey as a medicine. And so because there was these unstayed rectified whiskeys out there, this was a designation so that the doctor knew they were prescribing dangerous medicines to their customers as well. And then the Bottle and Bond Act took a long time for people to learn what it was. You know, there wasn't the social media that there is. You know, they would put on advertisements under the Bottle and Bond Act of 1897. I mean, that just those words on an advertisement in a newspaper would kind of look like, well, what's that? And it got people asking questions. It probably took 10, 20 years to get people to know what Bottle and Bond was. And then all of a sudden Prohibition comes along. But the whiskeys that were available during Prohibition, again, under a doctor's prescription, were all Bottle and Bond. There was no whiskey available during Prohibition that wasn't Bottle and Bond because it was all under the government supervision. And then after Prohibition, that became the standard. Can you come out with a Bottle and Bond? And so that was the first whiskey we came out with, was this bourbon here, Old Heaven Hill Bottle and Bond. This has now become the Evan Williams Bottle and Bond, because this was a local regional brand and this was a national brand. So it made more sense to make this the national Bottle and Bond. And Bottle and Bond was a big deal because that gave you credibility in the industry. You didn't have a Bottle and Bond, people didn't really take you too seriously after Prohibition. And then it took to the 60s, 70s, and 80s when American whiskey sales were doing this, and tequila sales and vodka and everything else was doing this. And then because those were 80 proof, Jimmy Russell told me this. He says, man, we were all didn't know what to do because he had all the stuff that's 101 proof. And, you know, they thought that getting a lower proof, getting it down to 86, which wasn't the minimum at 80, but maybe 86 was the deal. And then they brought it all the way down to 80. So that's when the Bottle and Bond started going out of fashion, was to try to match the lightness of rums, tequilas, and vodkas. It was obviously the wrong move, but sales were doing this. I mean, they were doing everything they could, and they were under that, you know, all these laws that you have to go by. So the only thing you do to make it lighter, and that's exactly when early times went from a bourbon to a whiskey, and they used barrels. So the Heaven Hill 6 year disappeared to my back bar. I don't over there, but it's now the Heaven Hill 7 year, which will be coming out in a few more markets and hopefully nationwide in the next year or two, depending on supplies. But Heaven Hill 7, it's now a 7 year, so it's one more year. It is a different whiskey, right? Taste different, one more year difference, not a lot. And now because it has its own proprietary glass, and we have to ship it further, and we're allowed to make some money. We are in the bourbon business, not the bourbon charity. If this was a Michter's product, it'd be $2,000, right? And so, you know, it's $40, $50 with us. We still have a great value. And we do have to look at our competitors. That Bottle and Bond is stated 7 years, and E.H. Taylor small batch and E.H. Taylor single barrel have 0 age statement, and they know exactly how old it is because they know it's from a certain season, and they know, but they know because it's different. I don't blame them. They don't want to put a year on it because they'd have to change labels every single time. I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but that Heaven Hill 7 year, 7 years age stated, those are not, and those are $45 to $80 a bottle. So we still have good value with ours, but we pushed the bourbon wagon up the hill without any mules for 80 years. We're allowed every once in a while to ride down a little bit and be able to make a little money. So I get why everybody's a little upset, but I also, you know, we are in the bourbon business, not the bourbon charity. And if you want to be unbendable and not be able to react and make money, let's not forget that Stitzel Weller went out of business, you know. So just because you've been around forever doesn't mean you're going to be around forever here. Heaven Hill 7 is dropping this month, says Ariana. Is that, I assume that's good information, Ariana.
Yes, that is good information. We were going to have it for this tasting, but we did not get it in time. But it is dropping this month in Ohio. You can look forward and stores at the end of the month.
And guess what? It's dropping this month in Kentucky too. We have not had it either. And I thought that was a bad move. But the company thought, man, they're already pissed that we dropped, we stopped making it. They're already pissed. And I might think, but they're already pissed. Let's just give it to them, right? Now they're pissed they don't get it. Yeah? But anyway, it worked out okay. And I got a 2.6 cumulative at University of Kentucky. So, they don't listen to me a whole lot. So maybe they should.
It seems like Heaven Hill, the age statement is really important to put it on a majority of their bottles. You know what I mean?
On something like that, it really would be, Troy, but you got to be careful too, because you can't really grow the brand. If the brand really takes off, you're stuck with that. You're handcuffed with that age statement. So you're really stuck in growing the brand. But this is okay. Like Henry McKenna, which we'll taste right now, we can sell every single drop of this, but then we'd be out of Elijah Craig 12-year for barrel proof. We'd be out of 11 and 12-year-old that goes into the small batch of Elijah Craig, and we'd be totally out of, there would never be any Elijah Craig 18-year-old barrels. So you got to be careful. Just because something's selling hot right now, don't be lured by the sirens to sell it. And as Max says, we don't have to. We want to have those other brands. We age things longer than most distillers. We want to have that. We don't particularly, we always want more money. We're in the bourbon business, not bourbon charity, but we don't need that money right now. So, they're not knocking at the door asking to pay our bills. We're doing just fine. But it's all about barrel inventory and how you handle all that. And that's a whole nother deal of how to do that. And to have this self-control to hold barrels back so that we can have those Heaven Hill 17-year-old barrels, those Old Fitzgerald 20-year-old barrels, those Easter eggs, right, that you all love so much and I love. But my dream would be to have things like this come back. To have the 4-year bottle of bonds at a really reasonable price that you can get all the time come back. That's my dream. And I've voiced that. Hopefully not too loud. If you do it too loud, they won't do it. I'll send samples whenever I get them. Now let's go back and revisit Evan Williams Bottle and Bond. Because the Henry McKenna is the same distillate. It's 6 years older. Now it is a single barrel, so those different barrels will taste different. So it's not a mingle of barrels like the other ways, but still it's a good, since it's the same distillate and 100 proof in the same charred barrels. Now Henry McKenna probably comes from more middle floors. Evan Williams comes from top, bottom, left to right. But still a good illustration of what 6 additional years does for Henry McKenna, as opposed to 4 years for this. So revisit Henry McKenna's youngest brother, which is Evan Williams Bottle and Bond. If we were tasting the Heaven Hill 7-year, that would be Henry McKenna's younger brother. This is Henry McKenna's youngest brother. There's that spice in the back of my palate. There's a vanilla, honey, and caramel right there. It's not a huge finish. It's not hugely deep and complex. Really don't need that. For a 4-year-old bottle and bond, it's for making cocktails. For you at home making a Manhattan or an old fashioned, for cocktail bars like Century Bar to make their drinks with, right? It's for making cocktails. You need a good base spirit, very quality, and proof high at 100 proof. Now let's taste Henry McKenna. Look at the deep color. 6 more years of age, 10 years. On the aroma, I'm getting oak right there in my nose. The spice is there, but the whole barrel notes totally different because 6 more years in that barrel. Now I'm getting some longer finish. I'm getting some more complex flavors because 10 years is a big age statement when it comes to American whiskey. They did an experiment when I was at Jim Beam. They did an experiment. They sent a barrel of Maker's Mark bourbon over to Iowa, where they make Lefroy. That's part of the same company. And they sent a barrel of Lefroy single malt over to Loretto, Kentucky. And neither one of them tasted very good after the experiment. It's kind of cool because, one's in a used barrel, being aged at an open rick house in Kentucky, full of single malt, 1 grain. And then you get a bourbon going over to a brand new charred barrel that's in a dunnage warehouse on a, 4 barrels high in a dunnage warehouse, just pyramid it up. Average temperature 55 degrees. Never got a lot of move, right? It was really something. This is 10 years at an open rick house. Boy, really brings alive what aging does. That 50% of the distiller's rule of thumb really comes through on that Henry McKenna, right? Mm-hmm. Jeremiah, I'm with you. This was my first favorite bourbon when I came to Heaven Hill. I blind tasted through a lot of the portfolio and I went, this is my favorite. And then I saw it was Bottle and Bond, Henry McKenna. I was like, I didn't really know much about Henry McKenna before I worked in our company. When you work at a distillery, you have blinders on. You don't really taste a lot of other people's stuff. So it made sense to me. I was on the Knob Creek team over there. So that's 9 years old, 100 proof. This is 10 years old, 100 proof. So this was, believe it or not, when I first started with the company, we were selling barrels, private barrels of Henry McKenna for like $29 a bottle cost. It was a hard sell. Don't we all wish we could have a time machine, go back and do that? Then it won the award. You want to know what it was before Henry McKenna? Well, that's what it was. Regionally, locally, just not a single barrel. I bought this bottle in 2007. I worked at Jim Beam and I was doing bottom shelf bourbons that were real sleepers. Of course, I love Bottle and Bond. I'm the Bottle and Bond guy. This was, I think, $16.99 when I bought it at Liquor Barn. And it was on the bottom shelf. You'll just take 2 barrels, Jeremiah? I'll take 10. But I'm greedy, right? Of everything behind me.
My wife is here, so I can only commit to 2 barrels at the moment.
Right. Well, it's different. This is my home bar. I'm really proud of this bar. There's a lot of great things back here. But the thing is, unless I do a Zoom tasting or I have friends over, I don't drink at home. I can't do my job as an ambassador and go out, do tastings during the day, meet customers out at night, come home and start drinking. So I have a policy. I don't drink at home unless I'm doing something like this. There's so many good things back here. There's so many great Parkers, so many great William Heaven Hills. And I only have 1 bottle each of these. I have to buy them. I don't get these things for free. So, and actually get, I have to pay the visitor center price and no discounts, no whatever. It's fine. because I only buy what I'm going to drink and buy and share with friends. So I don't buy and collect and trade and all that stuff. But I'll show you the best things that I have, and I think the most valuable to me are these. These are the most rare whiskeys in the world because they're sample bottles, and there was only like 10 of these in the world. Right? So this is 51% malt, sample, 8 years old, and 135.2 proof. Handwritten by me, because that's what it was. Right? And we did this for a special event. Right? So I'm waiting for the right time to open these. This is Old Fitz, 6 years old, 120.8 proof. There's only 10 of these bottles in the world. These are the coolest bottles that I have in plastic. Right? Because there are just not many of them, and you can finish off a bottle with a friend or two, and not get killed during the night, because they are they're small, they're 375. So these are my favorite, but of all the ones that I've tasted in a long time, this particular William Heavenhill, 12 years old, from the 10th floor of a brick rick house in Bernheim downtown at Barrel Proof. This is top 5 whiskey ever. You can talk to Ariana all you want. I don't know if she has access to that.
I don't think
and that's all I got is that little bottle. So if you ever come,
I don't think I have that pull. You're a better chance with Bernie.
if you're around a little bit, you're around here, and you can come up, then that qualifies for me to be able to drink with people, right? That qualifies. So you'd be doing me a favor. Sleepers, yeah, I love sleepers. The only, this isn't available everywhere, but when you come down, Cincinnati area and go across to, party stores and all that kind of stuff, any liquor store over here, the JTS Browns, the JW Dance of the world. But I think this is the best sleeper that you could get every day. We raised the proof from 86 to 90 on this. This is so good. And this is what, Ariana, how much does this go for in the
$26.99.
Let me tell you, this is one of the best deals in sleepers. I will blind taste this on people with some pretty big names, and it does really well. Oh, I forgot I had this one. Look at this. This is a friend of mine gave me this. This is a handwritten on here. 1989 or 85? 1985 Old Fitz Bottle and Bond. That much left. Those are my favorite bottles in the world. Little bottles like that, people call them handshakes now, but those are the kind of stuff that I like, those little handshakes. Favorite Bottle and Bond product that I've ever had? Well, I can only tell you the most recent one that I've had that I love. And we were doing this tasting with the total wine buyer, the guy who's everybody's boss. And it was over at one of our owners' houses. And we were, and the other customer came in, had all these dusties and whiskeys from the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. And the standout of the whole night was like a 1985 old Bottle and Bond Old Granddad. Blew everything away. And I guarantee you, in 1980 something, it was probably $6 a bottle. Which I've heard Never Wave Single Barrel is going to be Kentucky only release. I think there's talk of that.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I don't know if we can say it, but yeah, We're not getting any more in
Wouldn't be
Ohio.
surprised. That brand, unfortunately, I think is being over. The sales are going like this on it. It's just going down, 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 down. And it's such an amazing product. It was voted the best whiskey of the world or best spirit of the world 5 different times, but it just happened in the 90s and everybody forgot about it. And I think the fact that everybody's looking for barrel proof and high proof, bottle and bond and higher, I think at that 86.6 proof, it's just being overlooked. And the price point is so great for the consumer. It's not really being taken seriously, and we're getting this on the brand, and that's not a good sign of a brand. And that was Parker Bean's favorite brand, that was his baby, a vintage single barrel. So we thought the best way to combat that would be to make it more special by making it a Kentucky only thing. So when you come and visit, plus you got to come visit Kentucky to do it, so it might be a little lure to get you to come visit, and still it'd be a great thing to have. Plus, we were up 50% Elijah Craig, and that's the same distillate as Elijah Craig, right? So you can't go back in time and make more whiskey. So we do have some brands we can rob from Peter to pay Paul. But as a friend of mine always points out, you always want to be Paul in that transaction. Paul always gets paid, right? So if we make it a Kentucky only, that will allow us more barrels to put into where the increase in sales for Elijah Craig's coming, and still have the brand and not kill it, because you don't want to kill a brand. And it was Parker Bean's favorite brand. We can't kill Parker Bean's favorite brand. I guess we could, but I wouldn't sleep very well. But I think we're probably going to make the right decision on that brand. But these are all tough decisions, folks. We don't make these lightly when we have to do something like the Heaven Hill 6-year bottle and bond go away, or the 6-year 90 proof go away. These are very hard decisions. Virgin bourbon in North Carolina, things like that. But we're lucky that we have the same distillate for those that we can rob from Peter to pay Paul. Let's see, there was a question up here that I saw.
Hey, Bernie, do you want me to track the questions for you? Just read them for you?
Sure.
Okay. So I got one question here that says, what would be your top 5 that you can get your hands, top 5 bottled and bond bourbons that you enjoy that are available? Like we're not, I don't know how it is. Well, I do know how it is in Kentucky, but like in Ohio, we don't ever see like any of the Buffalo Trace products or anything like that. But what are the top 5 bottle and bond that you enjoy?
The bottle and bonds are, as I say, they're all Eagle Scouts. So when you see them, buy them. My particular favorites, my first favorite was Old Granddad. I walked into a bar last night, and the bartender just poured me a shot of Old Granddad. I didn't even have a choice, right? Because he knew the story that I told, and he says, "I know you work for Heaven Hill, but I know you love this, right?" So and I enjoy it. Of course, I enjoy it. The 6-year bottle of bond, I really can't count that because it's not available anymore. But that was kind of my everyday drinker when I did have people over, and still do. I have a decent supply here, so it's one of my tops. But I can't really throw that in. I'd have to say JTS Brown. And JW Dance, I like those. I mean, I love Evan Williams, but I just love those old labels, and they're just so authentic. These are the same distillates. They're all 4 years old, 100 proof, but they all taste different. Our sensory team is amazing at putting a slightly different flavor profile in each one. We have 1.9 million barrels in over 60 rick houses, so we have that luxury of, even if it's the same whiskey, same age, we can make them taste different. Henry McKenna's always been one of my favorites. It's hard to beat DOB, if you can ever find the 6-year-old DOB, but even the very old Barton. But even if you can find the 4-year-old, it's pretty damn good. It's also a high rye bourbon like Old Granddad, so that makes sense to me that I like those. But Mellow Corn's close to my heart. That's my phone case. That's the yearly marketing budget for Mellow Corn right there. That is a clear case and a label. So we don't have a big budget. Although when you come to the visitor center, there are Mellow Corn shirts and now a Mellow Corn hoodie. So that's pretty cool. This is my baby. This was my brainchild. the only bottle and bond great brandy in the world. So to put it in top 5, I couldn't do it. But these are just some that I love. One of the really cool ones, when I was at Jim Beam, this was my favorite bottle and bond at Jim Beam, other than Old Granddad. Look at that crappy label. Isn't that beautiful? Oh my God. There's nothing wrong with that. Old Tub's great, but why wouldn't they bring that back, right? Look at that. That is 4-year-old bottle and bond. Great. This was out for about 2 minutes. And I snagged the bottle for like $13. And then you didn't see it ever again. I watched the bottle and bonds.
It wasn't Bottle and Bond or that Kentucky Tavern Bottle and Bond was not my first whiskey, but that's what I used to drink back 25 years ago.
Oh man, you go to anywhere outside of Louisville, and a lot of places in Louisville, but most people in Louisville, they had ET or Old Foe in the well. And but anywhere out, especially Owensboro is big, and that's where the plant is down there, and the bottling plant and everything. And so the KT, all you had to say was KT. And that's what, or that's just what you got.
So Sam's asking, he's getting married next year, and he wants to know So Sam is kind of our resident tasting expert within the group, even for.
I wouldn't say that.
Go for it, Sam. Go ahead and ask what you want to do.
Well, I was going to say, so I'm getting married next year, and I'm going to do a blind of a bunch of affordable whiskeys that I can decide on what I want for the weddings. What Heaven Hill products would you say I should include in that tasting?
Well, definitely this.
All right.
And then throw that in with, whatever. Hell, throw a Woodford in there. Throw a, whatever in there. It's gonna, and you'll be surprised. But that one for sure. And then, I guess I hate to clutter it up too much. I think I would just do that one.
All right. It's on the list.
Or larceny, because have a lot of people there. Yeah. And so put a larceny small batch in there because it is lighter and sweeter. Not lighter. It's 92 proof bourbon, for God's sake. But it's a more of a sweet flavor profile, and that might appeal to a wider range of guests. But if you're going to drink it neat, have some drinkers that are going to drink things neat or on the rocks. I think that 1783 is going to be perfect for anybody that wants a bourbon and ginger ale or something neat. I think larceny, because it's wheated bourbon, doesn't shine as well when you're drinking it neat or on the rocks. That's just me.
All right.
What's the best experience for time and money you would recommend doing? Experiences and visitors experiences, I would think, Josh. They're all great. I think you should come to ours because I work there, but I've been to dozens, and I've had a great time at every single one. I don't think you can really go wrong at anyone's. I think everybody puts a lot of time and energy and passion into dealing with customers, and I think everybody does a phenomenal job.
What's your opinion on the old Bardstown bottled and bond?
I like it. It's it's out of a pot still, and that they have over there, and it is a lighter expression of bourbon than our Evan Williams or JTS Brown or any of that. But to me, if you tasted the difference between Rittenhouse Rye bottle and bond and Old Overholt bottle and bond, and they're both phenomenal products, that Old Overholt is lighter. That's the best way that I can put it. Gonna make different cocktails, right? And phenomenal cocktails. But I think it's just a lighter expression of bourbon. And I think because it comes out of that pot still over there, it's got a little more floral and fruity notes because it's touching on that copper, and I think that makes it express itself a little lighter than our more kind of bourbon-like Evan Williams or JTS Brown. I'm using the wrong descriptors, but that's my. I love it. I got it's back here. That's my bottle and bond section, by the way. I think every bar should have a bottle and bond section, and so that's where all the bottle and bonds live, is right there. What do y'all think of it? What do y'all think about the tasting, Deb? I mean, anytime somebody sees mellow corn at a tasting, I think they go, "Oh, okay, we're just going to start with this one." I think mellow corn, because that's what people were making in 1815, 1825, 1830, 1840, was high percentage of corn, almost 90 to 100% corn. And obviously they were using used barrels to just transport it. So to me, mellow corn is the most historic whiskey of all of them. There wouldn't be bourbon without aged corn whiskey. This was the catfish that crawled out of the ground onto the lake. This is the missing link that pointed us towards bourbon, that the barrel was going to work, and the barrel gave flavor. And then they started using more combination of new and used barrels. So I always love tasting, starting a bottle, especially a bottle of bond tasting with mellow corn, and then having the other two. Hopefully y'all enjoy the tasting and see the story that was bringing, not just for tasting three whiskeys. We're tasting three whiskeys to tell a story and illustrate the difference.
I think mellow corn is underrated, but it's awesome that the affordability behind it too as well. Like people always see it and they see it in the bottom, they're like, I'm not going to buy it, but
Yeah,
I think for what it is so good.
thank you. I mean, it's something that, that's a bartender's handshake. When I can be in Rome or Zagreb, Croatia, or Bratislava, Slovakia, and put my phone down on the bar, and the bartenders will all go, that's kind of cool.
Just a rough estimate, but do you know how many different corn whiskeys there are?
I don't. I know there's Platte Valley. I know there's Mellow Corn and Georgia Moon. I know there's Balcones. And now I know that 80 Laws makes a bottle and bond corn whiskey out of Denver. And now I'm struggling.
Appreciate it.
Bernie, what's your favorite barrel proof product from Heaven Hill?
Well, I'd have to say the Elijah Craig. That was when I first started. They started making that product only because the 18-year-old went dark because of the fire 18 years before. And I remember seeing that color. It was like coffee in that bottle. And everyone was shocked just how deep that color was, and almost afraid of it because it looked just so dark. And then we all tasted it and went, wow. And I think that brand, which wasn't even really supposed to be a brand, but became one out of necessity, and then out of what the comments people were saying when they got it from the visitor center. I think that revolutionized. I mean, you have to give George Stagg was, in Booker's was not first. Booker's was second, because it was Old Granddad 114 that was really the true barrel proof before that. You have to give all those its due, and there wouldn't be the barrel proof, subcategory without Stagg and Booker's, for sure, and 114. But I think that Elijah Craig 12 upped the ante and changed it for everybody. I don't know what you all think, but there's 12-year-old barrel proof for $60, $70. I mean, again, if that was Michter's, it'd be $4,000. If it was Kentucky Owl, it'd be $18,000. If it was Willet, it would be $5,000.
Is your guitar in tune?
I believe it is. This is my new guitar. It's a Firk. It's a Firkin guitar. So it's a Firk out of Czech Republic. Made right outside of Brno. And I'm Bernie. And I've been to Brno, Czech Republic. And I've been to Prague. And it's so cool to have a guitar from a place I've been to. And people like Molly Tuttle, who's a great guitar picker. And a lot of the thumb pickers really like this guitar. So I'm really glad to own one and have one. So and it's all mahogany. So front, back, sides, neck, everything's mahogany. So I always think of Ron Burgundy when I play this guitar. Have rich mahogany. I'm gonna thumb pick for y'all, which is using a thumb pick and banjo picks on my fingers. And that is a very Kentucky way of playing the guitar. It's called Travis picking out of Merle Travis. So you play the bass with your thumb, and you just keep playing that. So you don't need to hire a bass player. You're your own bass player. And you put your fingers, you play the melody. This is called Copper Kettle. And it's about making corn whiskey in Kentucky. And look for a line that says, my daddy made corn whiskey, my granddaddy did too, and we ain't paid no whiskey tax since 1792. And 1792 is not only the year we became the 15th state, but it was a middle finger to the Great Whiskey Rebellion, where they started levying taxes. So that's the last time they paid taxes and moved to Kentucky. So they got away with it. Get your copper kettle, get your copper coil, fill it with new made corn mash, and never will you toil as you lay there by the juniper while the moon shines bright, watching the jugs a filling in the pail of light. My daddy, he made corn whiskey. My granddaddy did too. We ain't paid no whiskey tax since 1792. As you lay there by the juniper while the moon shines bright, watching the jugs a filling in the pails of light. Build your fire with hickory ash and oak. Oh, don't use no green or rotwood. They'll get you by the smoke. As you lay by the juniper while the moon shines bright, watching the jugs a filling in the pale moonlight, in the pale moonlight. So, in the moonlight, anybody seen myself and Connor O'Driscoll on Moonshiners yet on Discovery with Tim and Tickle? We're on the Discovery Channel on Moonshiners American Revival, episode number 2, the Elijah Craig episode. So you can DVR it, you can record it, and you'll see myself and Connor O'Driscoll with Tim and Tickle on Discovery Channel.
I think I actually saw that. I mean, I did see it.
Yeah, they're trying to recreate the whiskey that Elijah Craig made. They went back and tried to make the cherry bounce that Ben Franklin made. Kind of a cool concept. I mean, what else are you gonna do? Well, it's been cool. Hopefully, I can come up with y'all another time and do something in person, and bring my guitar up
That's
and
the
do my
idea.
bourbon through bluegrass with y'all.
That's what Ariana and I were talking about just before you got on, was that we were hoping to do this in person at Century, but they're still developing that upstairs room. So
Yeah. Well, they'll get it done. It's like whiskey; it takes time. And then I know Joe was just down doing a barrel pick. He texted me the night before and asked me if I'd come out, and I already had another appointment that afternoon. But I always like hearing from folks. And Century Bar is a certified bonded premises, so that's one of the they carry every bottle of bond available in the state. That's something that myself and Heaven Hill has done. That's what that certificate is back there. Is that certified bonded premises?
First one in Ohio.
Yes, it was.
Thank you so much, Bernie. Does anybody have any questions before we hop off? And we'll have to do this again in person very soon.
I just wanted to say thank you to Bernie and you, Ariana, and Troy. Thanks for putting this together for us. We really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, I just wanted to say this is my first time doing something like this, and it was a lot of fun. Learned a lot.
Awesome.
Awesome. Glad you did. Well, I love talking about it. So anytime, and again, next time we'll come up and do it in person. We'll have even better time. Maybe I'll bring some plastic bottles and share some samples together.
There you go.
I just want to say thank you as well, Ariana, for all the work that you put into this as well, and Bernie for taking your time out to be with us tonight too. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks. Have a good
Thank
night,
you.
Bernie and everybody.
Y'all too.
Thanks.
Thanks, Bernie.
Thank y'all. Appreciate it.